We have the privilege of talking once again with Rabbi Leib Tropper in our Shoel and Meishiv series number 7. Pesach, as we know, as we've mentioned, is around the corner. But whatever time this is viewed, we understand that Pesach means, Pesach, one of the meanings is, which means a lot of words. We also know that we're cautioned, aside from Sifrei Yetzias Mitzrayim, that we have to be very careful about what we say and not to have the folly of speaking too many words. So this is an appropriate time, Rabbi, we could talk about the concept perhaps of Loshon Hora and some practical guides to Loshon Hora, more of the practical applications that we were talking about. Like, for example, is there more of an element of Loshon Hora or speaking Loshon Hora, let's say on a particular yontif, or in a particular place, meaning on Pesach, on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah, should one have to be more careful about it, or are there more consequences to it, or in a holy place like a shul?
That is actually a shaila that I had a little of a dispute with Rabbi Eichler Zweig thousands of years ago at the NCSY convention. I think it was way back. I was teaching in Yerushalayim, actually. The Mishnah Berurah Tafresh Lamed Tes talks about sitting in the sukkah and talking Dvarim Asurim. He says you shouldn't talk Dvarim Asurim on Yontif, a kol shken when you're sitting in the sukkah, implying that there's something about a Mokum Kadosh, or a thing that is a place that is a mitzvah is being performed with this place that you're sitting in, that you should not talk Dvarim Asurim, Kal V'chomer, you shouldn't talk Dvarim Asurim on that day, beyond the regular Isra of Loshon Hora. There is a sefer called Tevas Goyme from the Pri Megadim. And the Pri Megadim brings the Alshich HaKadosh in Parshas Emor, if I remember correctly. It says in the pasuk, "Le'savaru eish b'chol moshvaisechem b'yom haShabbos." Do not burn fire in all your dwellings on the day of Shabbos. Eish in Musar and Kabbalah refers to eish of kas, rage. That's eish. Eish is rage. Fire is Yetzer Hara and rage. So the Alshich is saying, "Le'savaru eish." You shouldn't create machlokes and fighting and anger. B'chol moshvaisechem, all your dwellings. Besides the obvious simple meaning, I'm not lighting a fire, it also means don't light the fire of machlokes, don't light the fire of sinna on Shabbos. So he's obviously saying that there is a separate issue almost on doing that on Shabbos, which would then mean that certain divarim asurim, diburim asurim, speaking certain things, are more profound in their wrongness on Yom HaKadosh than another day. So yes, the answer is there's no question that Loshon Hora on Pesach time, sitting at the table at Pesach time, and during Shulchan Aruch, to turn that into from a mamish to Yom HaNorah to Yom HaKadosh, a Pesach night, turn that into a schmoozing and a little bit sichas chulin is inappropriate. And Kal V'chomer, it's also Loshon Hora, Rachmana litzlan.
The next question I wanted to ask you would be pertaining to a particular person. For example, what about speaking Loshon Hora on an elevated person, the stature of a person like a Kohen?
Right. So I'm pretty sure that the Mishnah Berurah himself, the Chafetz Chaim himself, discusses that on a Kohen in the introduction, Mitzvah 9, Asay 9, Asay Tes, he says, he refers to the halach in Choshen Mishpat that Hamavazeh Kohen, if somebody embarrasses a Kohen, his bush is much greater than another person. And the Rambam writes clearly, "V'tzorach kol adam Yisrael," that every Jew has to be careful. Linhoig behen kavod harbe, to treat them with greater kavod. The Aderes, the great Aderes, who was the father-in-law of Rav Kook Zatzal, writes in the Sefer Cheshbonos Shel Mitzvah. He argues because he says it's not the Chafetz Chaim in the Asin want to say it's a bittul mitzvah to say the kiddashtoi, that you're not mitzvah to say in the Torah is to sanctify a kohen, and by speaking Loshon Hora about a kohen you mevatel that mitzvah asay. So the Aderes is coming along and saying no, since it's not befun of Fnei kohen, you're talking about him in somebody else's house, you're talking Loshon Hora about him to somebody else. It's not anymore bittul asay of the kiddashtoi. So I think the best thing to do is stay away from Loshon Hora kohen for sure. I would trust the Chafetz Chaim on this, as he's the master of the Isurim of Loshon Hora. We would stay away from talking on a Kal V'chomer and a kohen.
Kal V'chomer. Now, also in this area of speaking to or with or about somebody, there's a concept known as ishto kegufo. A person's spouse is like himself, a person's wife is like himself. Therefore, a person might think, well, I'm really just talking it over with myself. Maybe I could say Loshon Hora to my wife, or maybe because it's about my wife, maybe, because she's my spouse. Is there a particular element of caution that has to be taken about not only speaking Chas v'Shalom about one's mate, but to one's mate in terms of things that might be Loshon Hora?
So in Klal Ches, in the Chofetz Chaim, in Sefer Chofetz Chaim, it says clearly that there's an isser to talk Loshon Hora to one's wife. And he says, Rabbi mishtabshim b'zeh, people make mistakes in this. They talk to the wives about all kinds of things that happen. Now, there is a caveat to this, and that is if a man sees that he needs it for therapeutic purposes to talk out something that happened, then he may share it with his spouse, wife to a husband, husband to a wife, but the other spouse cannot accept it as absolutely true. He cannot accept it as absolutely true. So yes, there's place for that if that's only a cathartic experience. But if she's really angry, she really believes that she's on Loshon Hora, then there's a problem. There is no head to ishtika gufa to talk Loshon Hora.
What about remarks which might be seemingly harmless or innocent in the way they're expressed? Are there particular things that we have to watch out for?
Loshon Hora, even if it's something that's going to ultimately hurt him, whether it's the words itself or a genai. Let's say you say someone is very cerebral, they're very smart, they're very cerebral, and the person says, I don't need a cerebral person because it's really going to slow up my work. I need somebody who's... So even though he's saying something is very... But if it's going to hurt his work, if you know that perhaps it's going to hurt his job, that is Loshon Hora, 100%.
Even if it seems totally innocuous and harmless.
Exactly. Well, it's obviously not harmless. It's going to maybe lose his job, maybe lose his status in his job. It may, and once you stay away from that.
Well, that would lead to the next question, Rabbi Leib, is because somebody might not even anticipate in that harmless remark that there might be harm from it.
Well, if you don't know, you're talking to somebody who's trying to employ him, that's another story.
Well, would you say it's okay or a good idea to perhaps, as a way of strengthening our guardianship of not speaking Loshon Hora, that should a person makabel on themselves not to speak good or bad about anybody for a certain amount of time, let's say for 6 months or a year, not to say anything bad or even good about anybody?
Right. So I saw they brought that actually in Meishiv issue, the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim did not appreciate that at all. He used to say, tzedek is tzedek, which justice is justice. If he's a good person, you say he's a good person. Don't hold back the good things because you want to hold back from Loshon Hora. It was a Chazon Ish's psak. It's very interesting. I'm not sure I ever saw that brought down anywhere else, but in the Meishiv issue, the Chofetz Chaim, from the Chazon Ish, stories about the Chazon Ish's life, he makes it very clear that's not acceptable to just disappear from the world, the planet, and not talk anything good about anybody who there is good to say about him or her.
All right, Rabbi, thank you, and we hope that this Pesach will be a Pesach filled with Divrei Kedusha and Tahora.
And we should always have our hopes. Never give up the hope, because we're going to say at the end of Pesach Seder, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. We've been saying it for thousands of years, but that doesn't mean that it's a track record. The track record is yet to be proven. The promise of God surpasses any track record that we ever had in our life before. So, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, may it be so this year, Bez Hashem Yisbarach, L'ol b'zecha, we'll take the people with beards, payas, without payas, with kippas shruga, with regular yarmulkes. I'm going to make a big, big circle. And maybe the Eibush can help us schlep Melech HaMashiach from Shemayim to come down with that big circle. We just bring him down. Maybe that Achdus will inspire the Mashiach to just come running down to us, Bezos Hashem.
Amen.
A good gebench to Yantiv to all.
Amen.